So let's say you found a skeleton. How would you tell it to die? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Well, hey everyone, welcome to the after show. Let me just adjust this a little bit. I am here with Jackson Wheat, David P. Neff, and of course, Ross Thatcher, Flat Earth Aussie, or Flat Earth Aussie Ross. He's gone by a few names, but they're all pretty cool in my opinion. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna do what I normally do for after shows, and I'm gonna start with what everyone thought, and I'm gonna actually start with Ross as the other person who was, in the debate, and then I'll go, as you say, anti-clockwise, and go to David, then Jackson, ending with myself. So Ross, why don't you start us off by telling us what's your takeaway from the debate? What'd you think? Try to keep it to around 2-ish minutes or so we can cycle through and then open it up.
Yeah, no worries. Well, it was always a pleasure to chat with somebody online that gets some exposure to the flat Earth, no matter what. It was a little bit disappointing that you didn't actually come to present the globe model, which is obviously what the majority of people believe in, because that's what I prefer to try and smash as much as possible. I call myself in my own head, like in my own headspace, the globe Earth smasher, because it rhymes with Ross Thatcher and
I like
the
that.
lyrics to a song. Yeah, I'm the globe Earth smasher. Anyway, basically, yeah, it was a little bit disappointing that you came up with that alternative flat Earth point of view, because there was nothing at all like how it represents reality the way I see it. So it was a good thing that we then moved forward and then did start discussing the globe. I think I represented the flat Earth side of things reasonably well, like under the conditions, and all in all, yeah, it's good times, like we all ended on a good note with none of us flew off into hissy fits like
Oh yeah.
I've seen some flat earthers sometimes do, and yeah, all in all, it was enjoyable.
Well, Ross, I've said this to a lot of people, and I'll say it here now. If we were in the same place, you seem like the kind of guy I would be happy to go grab a beer with, and sure, we might disagree about a lot of stuff, but you seem like a nice, friendly guy, and as everyone has already pointed out, you got an epic beard, so.
Yeah, well, I just think with any conversation, the point is not to get in each other's face.
Yeah.
I agree to disagree with people all the time, obviously, because I take an alternative viewpoint on a whole range of things. So I'm pretty good at holding my tongue and, basically just being a friendly, nice person wherever I go. I'm not out to make enemies. But if anybody wants to engage and ask questions, then I always do my best to answer them as honestly as I can. And hopefully, in doing so, not offending their beliefs at the same time. I just say this is what I think is probably the most likely outcome or most likely explanation for the thing that you're asking.
Okay. Well, I would like to bring it to David P. Neff and see what he has to say about the debate.
I thought it was a pretty decent debate. I commend both of you for being respectful to each other. It's an interesting way for you to open up Dapper Dino with your own flat Earth model. I'm honestly not sure I am a big fan of that approach. I think I would have approached it differently by just going through the standard. Here's the evidence for the globe Earth, and here's why a flat Earth is wrong. But I thought it was very much an interesting approach in your opening.
All right. Now, I know that Jackson is actually here because I bullied him into being here, and not so much because he actually watched the debate. Because, of course...
I have words.
Please, go ahead and say the words.
Subscribe to Dapper Dinosaur. Thank you.
That is good advice. I also encourage people to subscribe to me. In fact, actually, early next week, 5,000 subscriber special. I just hit 5,000 recently, and now I'm at 5.53 or something thousand. So, hey, going strong, getting some nice channel growth in there. Hopefully that turns into increased views. It doesn't always.
No deputy doodah.
That's me. So I guess it's on to me then. And I think it was an interesting debate, and there is a reason that I took the tactic that I did. See, the first Flat Earth debate I did, Ross here was in the call. He was one of the debaters. I think it was a 3v3, wasn't it, Ross?
Yeah, I was called in at last minute, and
Yeah.
not my preferred style of having to enter into any discussion when you got that many
Right.
competing different points of view. But anyway, yep.
So I want to explain sort of my thought process in getting to this debate and the opening that I gave. So the animation that you're seeing was not actually made for this debate. This animation of me standing on a flat Earth centered on Antarctica was made for that debate a while back. And the reason I did it was, first, I thought it was thematic, but second, I decided to put it centered on South America, or sorry, the South Pole, for one big reason. Flat Earth is just laughably inaccurate any place past the equator to the south if you center it on the North Pole. But it's as accurate if you center it on the South Pole for the Southern Hemisphere as the normal average Flat Earth map is for the Northern Hemisphere, which is to say, not very, but kind of okay-ish. And so I thought that because at least one of the people I was going to be discussing was from the Southern Hemisphere, it would be a fun thing to do. But as I was approaching this one, I realized every Flat Earth debate goes the same way, right? The Flat Earther has some arguments against the globe that don't actually make any sense. And then the person arguing for the globe goes ahead and explains why the globe actually does explain all of these things adequately. And then it just repeats. I didn't want that to happen again, because that's the way it always goes. What I wanted to do, which I think I accomplished, was to show that even on the terms of the Flat Earth model is ridiculous, because when you adapt it to an equally valid hemisphere, the Southern Hemisphere, to make it better at predicting events in the Southern Hemisphere, Flat Earthers think it's ridiculous, even ones from the Southern Hemisphere. Now, I know that Ross here is not going to agree with my assessment of how that debate went, but that is my honest assessment, is that we found out that Flat Earthers think the Flat Earth is ridiculous once you give an alternate but equally valid version of their model.
Well, that's the problem. It's completely invalid.
But the thing is, it's literally just the inverse of the actual distortion of reality that is the Flat Earth.
Well, no, it's actually the inverse of the reality of the artificially constructed globe, but it's not the way we actually view the world as it is. The way we view it as it is shows this to be completely ridiculous, because you've assumed a globe in the first place. You've then made a projection of the globe to give us the azimuthal equidistant map, which, as we know, isn't exactly accurate. It does distort the continents to the outside of the equator, because it was based on the globe in the first place. Now, if we went back and started from scratch now with what we know, we might actually be able to redesign the actual world as we know it into a more coherent map. But it's no great secret that the AE map is exactly what the United Nations use, and it does also match quite precisely towards this map that appeared back in 1913 in the Hawaiian Gazette, which was alleged to be a 1,000-year-old map hidden away in a Japanese Buddhist temple, and it shows the world as we see it from above, plus an extra 33 of all numbers continents spread outside of what we consider to be the Antarctic Circle. So the AE map is probably the closest we have to a real representation, which matches things which have existed from, as far as we know, over 1,000 years ago. If not, then at least a grand fake from over 100 years ago, which was still long before Universal Pictures was showing us images of a globe, which didn't start till about 1927, I believe. And it turns out that when NASA faked their first images of Earth from space, it matched that same Universal Pictures image from 1927. So, there is that.
Well, first I would say it's almost like when you go up into space and take a picture of the Earth, you get something that looks like the Earth as based on real-world cartography, which is kind of the thing you would expect if NASA weren't lying. So I'm not sure why that's a suspicious thing, but I do want to say that in the and I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a frog in my throat today. I've been talking for like 6 hours already, so I'm on the way out in terms of my voice. Sorry, guys. I'm going to have to spend like the entire day tomorrow like sipping tea and not talking. But there is... Oh, yeah, I mean, if I had some beer. Have some rum, I guess. But anyway, there was some call in the chat that they said they wanted a dumpster fire. So here we go. Are you ready? Ross, You're dummy and your beard smells. There you go. That was dumpster fire. Shoot back. What do you got for me?
Actually, my nose smells. My beard doesn't have that ability, but
You know,
it's interesting. It has like cat-like whisker effects where I can detect the future from hundreds of years in the past, but it doesn't detect odors.
So here's an interesting thing. You tell the joke where your beard doesn't smell, your nose does. There are languages where actually the verb for to emit an odor is different from the verb to receive an odor and detect it with your nose. Whereas in English, we just use the same verb.
Smell.
Yeah, but there are languages where those are two different words.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, the English language lacks a lot when it comes to things like that, and it's basically, I think, how it also shapes our psyche is the way we think is through language, and so obviously, if we're missing terms in our vocabulary, there's probably a lot of reality we're missing out on simply because we don't have the words to describe it.
So you are a proponent of the stronger version of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, huh?
Up to which one?
The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is a hypothesis in linguistics that is, it kind of goes on a roller coaster as to how well received it is, but the basic idea is it says that the language that you speak is the filter through which you perceive reality, and it fundamentally changes your perception of reality because you can only think in languages that you speak. And as a corollary, when you learn a new language very well, you gain a new mode of thinking and can perceive the world in different ways that you hadn't before.
Yeah, that's excellent. I've never actually heard it expressed that way before, but yeah, definitely.
Okay.
It's I spend a lot of time in nature, really, like basically listening to the birds and I'll even say I've communicated, I think, in a sort of telepathic way, even with fish out in the wild. And so I think this awareness of experiencing things without language opens up our minds to a whole different reality from what we generally think of when all we do is hang around with fellow humans who speak in one particular language. So to hear it from that human point of view, that they're learning different languages, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Wait, here's the tricky thing though. The internet is watching, and there's a reason that I now get YouTube ads in Spanish. And it's not because I spend a whole lot of time studying Spanish, but it's because sometimes I read things in Spanish, and the internet notices. So do be aware that when you start doing that kind of stuff, they will notice, and they will start targeting ads to you in Spanish. I have so many like political and sometimes even just like, here's a product that we're just going to advertise to you now in Spanish, and I'm just like, guys, I'm an English speaker. You don't have to.
Excuse me. Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
I may have not been paying attention close enough. It's entirely possible. I have to ask. Did you say? I heard fish and telepathy in the same sentence.
I do think that happens. Yeah.
Did we gloss over that?
We did. Would you like to dive into
why?
it?
Yes.
Go. Let's do it. Ross, talk about fish telepathy. Jackson wants to know because Jackson works in an aquarium.
Okay, well, yeah, I actually had my own aquarium for many years.
Oh, nice.
Back when
Very nice.
I was cleaning pubs, I had the opportunity to buy a closing down pet store, got it for a steal, and over the subsequent following years, I built up a really awesome, thriving business, had over 100 individual fish tanks and so on. So I developed a strong sympathy, how I think of it, towards fish. It was almost like every day, I'd be in there, I'd be feeding them. Every Sunday would be my day off, and I'd go in there and I'd be doing the water changes on each individual tank. So I sort of developed a bond and a fondness for these fishy friends who I became very attached to or just sympathetic towards. And so then when I go out into the wild and I'd observe fish in the wild, it's not like it's a direct telepathic as in conversation, but there's a genuine acknowledgement of one another and a sympathetic feeling towards each other where you acknowledge, I see you, you exist. Whereas some people just see something, oh, there's something, a tasty meal or whatever. But I just see a living being and acknowledge the beauty of its awareness and have no ill feelings towards it. Like I have no intention to want to hunt it and kill it and eat it, sort of thing. I just appreciate it for what it is at the time. That's I think the difference.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. I see what you're. I see where you're coming from.
So
yeah, it's not like I'm speaking to them and saying, "Hi, how you doing?" They say, "Yeah, I'm great. How you doing? Lovely day." That sort of thing. Yeah, it's just like we're here now in this present moment.
Well, I I will say everyone I've ever talked to has been a fish so far. So there is that.
Fish.
Oh yeah. Jackson,
But have you communicated with them telepathically, Dapper?
Generally, no. It's usually been verbal
No.
communication, and primarily through a spoken language, or sometimes they'll type at me and I'll type back.
Look, I can get Alex in here. Oh, I mean, I can get someone we don't know to do sign language that no one knows.
Yeah, no one knows. Well, actually, if you remember correctly, I do know a little bit of sign language that was in there.
Aha, yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, look. So here's one of the things for those of you who might be new here. There's a weird amount of linguistic background for me. So
I think weird is an understatement. Yeah.
Okay, fine. There's a truly bizarre level of linguistics
Dapper
background.
has an absolute superpower, and that is linguistics.
Oh, that's a little bit extreme there.
Dapper, I don't know like anyone except a professional linguist who knows as much about languages as you do.
Okay, fair.
Tell me I'm wrong.
Fair. No, that's
there
fair.
you go. That's what I thought. Exactly.
I personally tended to focus only on the English language, and I think if you can try and do one thing well and excel at that, that's probably better than trying to do a bunch of things mediocrely. But I'm sure that there are some cunning linguists out there who are capable of mastering more than one language.
So AT2 Production asks, are you calling me a fish? And the answer is yes. I am in fact calling you and all other humans fish. And I have good reason.
Lungfish.
Yeah. I have good reasons.
The scaly nature of them.
So if we want to stick with being monophyletic, you cannot exclude humans from being fish if you include lungfish as fish, and you include salmon as fish, and you include sharks as fish. Because humans are much more closely related to lungfish than they are to salmon or sharks. So
in doodle. Make toaster strudel.
And wouldn't you also have to say that humans are reptiles in that regard as well?
Well, so that's one of the big questions, though. What is a reptile?
Is it though?
Well, what is a reptile? Generally,
what is a fish?
Well, that's the thing. If you include all those things as fish, but what you include as reptiles is a bit up in the air. So, are early synapsids reptiles? Most workers no longer use the term, and instead they'll say that they're amniotes, but they're synapsids, and they'll reserve the word reptile for sauropsids, which is the sister clade to synapsids.
Okay, but that also depends on where the anapsids shake out.
Anapsida is not a monophyletic group. It's polyphyletic to hell.
It depends on which members it has, doesn't it? Because it could be monophyletic.
Well, the thing is, if you define a monophyletic anapsida, then it's probably going to end up being basal to actual crown amniotes.
Or parareptilia, whatever the
parareptilia
more correct name is.
Parareptilia is, in fact, a evolutionary grade that is basal to crown amniota.
Well, there you go. And so we're still talking reptiles here.
No, we're talking parareptiles. And it's a grade, not a clade.
I find all this
but they fall
labeling things
in
with different
amniotes,
names.
don't they?
Well, so one thing is,
creating
these aren't just
division.
labels. These are, in fact, reflections of actual events in the history of life.
But that's what you believe. You don't know this.
Well,
You
I
were
do know
told
it,
this.
but I
You're
also
taught this.
believe it.
Well, you're taught this, so hence you think you know.
Okay,
it,
I
but
wasn't.
you weren't
I wasn't
there to
taught
actually
any of
witness
this.
it.
I wasn't taught any of this. I had to investigate it. In fact,
Well,
I was taught things
whether
quite
you
to
was
the contrary.
autodidactic or taught otherwise, you still learnt it from somewhere. Like, where did you research this? Did you travel back in time to witness it personally? I don't think so.
Well, so it's a combination of things such as examining the formal descriptions, as well as in some cases the actual fossils. In some cases, now granted, my actual fossil studies have been much smaller than my investigation of the description of fossils. But there's also, you can take a look at the actual, even you can run for yourself the raw phylogenetic data. You can actually take the gene sequences onto your computer, run the analyses, or you can do it by hand if you want to do by hand cladistics or even by hand phylogenetics, which, I mean, good luck to you if you want to do it by hand. I would suggest a machine help you, but you could.
That sounds
my
gross.
point there. My point is that just by giving all these things the particular labels, which is whether they be correct or incorrect is neither here nor there, but what it is really doing is creating this separation of consciousness by saying that it is other because you've labeled it as other. Whereas when it
most of
comes
what
to
we've been talking
consciousness
to would
of
include us.
living, actual currently living creatures around us, is that they are conscious in the here and now. Whereas, you know, you're sort of focusing on some great historic
Right.
past to try and attach these labels to things and say that it followed this genetic process to become what it is today. Whereas I tend to think that everything, if you looked at everything, you know, from an insect to a bird to any living thing as a form of consciousness in its own right, and try to experience that consciousness through its way of detecting consciousness, that is how you connect on this so-called telepathic level. So,
Dapper,
you
you
know, like
hate
all
me.
this labeling and stuff is nice and sweet and everything, but I think it
Dapper,
goes
you
away from
hate
the
me.
purpose of our
Jackson,
being
you've known that for
to
years.
connect with reality.
Anyway, guys, I gotta get going.
Oh, all right.
No,
well,
you better not. You are not tapping out.
bye, David. It's been nice having you. So, actually, I would like to push back on that a bit,
Hey, mate.
Ross, because I actually think that realizing that life has a shared ancestry actually makes me feel more, not less, connected to other creatures. So, for instance, there are actually a number of pets here. So there are 2 dogs and 2 leopard geckos sharing this dwelling with me, and I think it actually makes me feel more close to them, knowing that in fact we share ancestors going back for the dogs into probably the Cretaceous, and with the lizards,
90 million years or so.
yeah, and with the lizards going back probably closer to like the
320 million years
Carboniferous,
ago.
the Carboniferous-ish.
So this is something then that you're just fantasizing inside your head.
Oh no, it's
inside
quite
your
well
head.
established.
It's based upon popular belief, but to say that
No, it's
No,
in
it's
fact
not actually.
based on hard
false.
data.
No, it's not. There's absolutely no
So-
evidence whatsoever that we share a common ancestry with anything else other than humans. Just as
So
those
how do you
geckos
know that? How do you
share
know that?
no common ancestry with anything but geckos.
So do you
How
know
do I
you know
know
that
that?
there are like
Because-
there are lots of different species of geckos, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are lots of species of geckos. There is only one current species of human, right? So how do you make the distinction that it's okay for one human species, because we're not even all the total morphological range of humans alive today. There were other humans within our species alive in the past that we do not have their morphological range today. So how do you
Well,
make
again,
that
this is a-
distinction between all these geckos versus us? And there's
Well,
just
this is
no
still
overlap.
another human construct, isn't it? Like, I mean, if we really looked at it really closely, we could say, you know, we've got different races like Caucasians, Asians, Negroids.
But they can still all
Aboriginal
interbreed.
species. We
These
can
geckos
interbreed,
can't
exactly.
all interbreed. The
Well, but
geckos
most
can't
of
all
those
interbreed.
geckos actually can interbreed,
They
just as
can't.
many different bird species that are similar
Okay, so
enough
so for
can
instance, there
interbreed,
are
and we're
different
similar enough to
populations.
one
Hold on,
another
hold on,
that
hold
we
on a
can
second.
interbreed.
Hold on, guys. I want to make a clarification so that way I think it'll help move this along a little bit. Because now I'm jumping into moderator role, partly because, again, my voice is tired. So, Ross, is it your contention that all members of Geckoidea, or maybe Gekkonidae, or maybe what grouping is it that you think all can interbreed? Is it Geckoidea?
Well,
Is it Eublephaриdae? Is it Gekkonidae?
That's not my position that I take. My position I take is every living thing has its own particular consciousness, and it is more attracted to its own kind in order to reproduce with than trying to classify them as
Okay,
a kind or
but you-
type or a name, a label of separation that separates one from another. And obviously, you know, the more attracted we are to our own kind is generally how we reproduce, and the geckos will do the same, the birds will do the same, and sometimes under certain confinement, like lions and tigers, they will interbreed and create a liger or a tyon or whatever you want to call it. But you know, that's sort of
okay,
the
but
exception to the rule rather than what would happen
I want
if
to
left
back
its
up
own
because
devices.
I want to understand your claim as precisely as I can before Jackson tries to address it, because I don't want Jackson to address something that you're not saying.
Fair enough.
You said geckos can interbreed.
Some
Geckos.
can, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so if it's some, then that's not a controversial claim because some of any group of animals can interbreed. Some humans can interbreed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Some horses can interbreed.
Yeah.
Some canids
zebras.
can interbreed. But that isn't so you're not really making a claim that is in any way controversial. So what is the point that you're trying to make by saying geckos can interbreed, which is now apparently some geckos can interbreed?
Well, it's just saying that they don't create new species by interbreeding with other geckos. They're still going to be geckos.
I tend to
Just as
agree.
if you cross a horse with a zebra, you might get a hybrid mix between the two, but you're not going to create a whole new species.
Okay.
Which
Yes.
is basically what you're saying
but-
is that we share
Okay.
common ancestry with the dog or the
Okay, well,
gecko
hold
or
on.
something somewhere
okay.
way back in time.
I think I understand.
it's
I think I
fine.
understand the point. So I'm gonna see if I can restate your point, and if you agree that I'm restating it accurately, then I want to have Jackson take a look at it. Okay? Does that work for you?
Sure.
Okay.
Go for it.
So the statement that I'm hearing from you, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you cannot get new species out of hybridizing existing species, and therefore the increase in the number of species over time, as evolution posits, is something that we don't have evidence for. Is that a fair assessment of your statement?
That's more or less it. Yeah, we see a decline in the number of species rather than an incline.
Okay, Jackson, go ahead.
Okay, so that's absolutely utterly false. First of all, for like every group, we see if you look at like pick any group, you see a start of this group, and then you see a diversification event, or a series of
Monoplacophora.
diversification events for that.
I picked Monoplacophora
Sure,
just because I know you like them.
sure. I mean, they're cool. I'm not uber familiar with the phylogenetics of monoplacophorans. I'll take a group I am more familiar with. The Feniines are a group of scarab beetles, and we see a few of them about 55 million years ago, and then we see an increasing series of diversification events as they colonize different parts of Amazonia, as well as the archipelagos of Central America before it fully coalesced into what we now know as Central America. It is also the case that, yes, while species can form through hybridization events, that does happen from time to time, like the big bird finch on the Galapagos. That
Also,
that
hooray
does
for
happen.
olive baboons.
Right, sure. But that is not, when people are talking about speciation, that's not normally what we're referring to. We're not typically referring to two species hybridizing to form a new species, so that can happen. Normally what we're talking about is one population, one species, splitting into two. That's normally what people are referring to when they talk about speciation. So, for example, I'll just give you one example. There's a crawfish called the marbled crawfish. Now, it underwent a whole genome duplication event. Its entire genome was copied. It went from being diploid, having 2 copies, to triploid, having 3 copies. So now, this population, which has this whole genome duplication event, is asexual. It no longer reproduces with the original population. It reproduces totally asexually. So would you say that's a new species? It didn't form through hybridization. It formed because of a mutation, which conferred a separate reproductive ability to it. And this happened in the 90s. This didn't happen tens of millions of years ago. This happened in the 90s. We tracked it back to like where the
Okay.
specific individual was.
Well, it's the first I've heard of it, and it sounds to me like basically what's happened is you've got a hermaphrodite, and this hermaphrodite was able to produce more hermaphrodites, which produce more hermaphrodites. So
Incorrect.
it's
Well,
definitely
this is not a hermaphrodite. It was
well,
sexual,
how can
it
it
was
produce
strictly sexual.
asexually?
Well, hold on.
So you could actually switch back and forth through Mendelian means. Like, for instance, rotifers do that. You can switch back and forth between whether you do one or the other.
Yeah, but to produce asexually generally means that okay, so
No,
you're
they're
not
all
breeding.
female. Yeah, they're all female. They go from being males and females to just being all females in this population. And so
Okay,
that's how you do
they're basically
parthenogenesis.
cloning themselves.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so that's not really creating a new species, is it? It's just creating
Why
a
not?
clone of itself.
But it is.
An exact replica.
Why? Well, hold
But-
on. Let's find out. Why do you think that isn't a new species? What is it? What's your definition for species?
Well, the species would be, say, like, what was this thing? A crawdaddy or a lobster or
Yeah,
something?
it's a freshwater lobster essentially.
Yeah. Mm.
It-
Right.
Look, the term for
So,
that in
so
English
it's still
varies
a freshwater
wildly
lobster,
across the
isn't it?
world.
It hasn't spread wings and become a bird, or it hasn't, grown legs and become a mouse.
Can you
It's
cite
still
any
basically a
definition of
lobster.
species that includes those traits?
What was that again?
So if I ask you, like, what is the definition of species? Do you know any definitions of the word species that include either gaining the ability to fly or gaining legs?
Well, basically, that is what evolution is saying, or
It's not, though.
saying that
Okay,
we share
whether or
common
not it is,
ancestry.
there's a
It's
question
saying
at
that we
hand.
evolved from something able
Okay,
to
hold on,
reproduce
guys.
successfully with another one
Hold on,
of
guys.
our kind.
I'm trying to
other
moderate
kind.
because right now I'm sort of backing out and let this be a Jackson Ross thing. But that does mean, though, I want to make sure that we're speaking clearly. So
Right. Okay.
Jackson is not asking what evolution does. We might get there later. Right now, when you claim that X and Y are not a different species, we need to know what your definition of species is. How do you know? So, for instance, most people would say that the red fox and the gray wolf are different species. They have the same number of legs, they have the same number of eyes, ears, nose, teeth. I believe they even have the same number of nipples, but don't quote me on that, I'm not sure. They have the same number of tails, the same number of livers, kidneys, lungs. Hey, nipples are an important thing for mammals. It's not embarrassing. You weirdos like to feed your young that way. I don't know. I don't get it. But so we can't simply say that because something didn't get new wings or a new set of legs that it isn't the same species, unless we want to say that every single animal with 4 legs is the same species, which would make horses the same species as dogs and the same species as penguins, I guess. So I don't think we can go there. So what is your definition of species that allows all the things that people normally would consider different species, which I assume you're going to agree with in most cases? What is that definition that you would use?
What I was in the process of saying when you butted in anyway was saying basically it's the ability to reproduce with a similar kind to have fertile offspring. And if you can't do that, then you probably have a different species, and you're probably barking up the wrong tree, so to speak. You probably should invest your sexual desire in the things of your own kind, where you can produce fertile offspring. And I would suggest that is what defines a species one from another.
Okay, so we're going to go with the reproductive isolation definition, which is one I like.
I like it too. It's pretty good in most cases. It's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Jackson,
given that definition, which is the Ernst Mayr biological species concept, the ability to like reproduce and have fertile offspring, right? So given that definition, which we're all okay with for these purposes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this new crawfish, which can no longer interbreed with the original population due to a mutation, therefore a new species? Because it meets this criterion.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a new species simply because it is still only reproducing itself by whichever means it uses to reproduce itself. It's still not changing into something different from what it started as.
But what was our criterion for species?
Being able to reproduce your own kind.
Nope, that's not what we said.
Being able to reproduce. Yeah, it was being able to reproduce within a population and create fertile offspring. Now, whatever that population is, whatever. But
and
being able to produce fertile offspring. And so, since it can no longer do that,
but you said therefore. You said it does produce offspring capable of reproducing,
but not with the ancestral population.
Not with the ancestral population. Right. It does, but not with its original population.
Which means it's no longer the same species as the original population by the definition that you, Ross, agreed to. So if you'd like to change...
reproducing its own kind, its own kind of fertile, so I don't see
which is why it's still a species, but it's a new one.
Yes. How's it new?
Okay.
Like, what's new about it, apart from being able to do it without a partner?
So it had a whole genome duplication, right? It duplicated its genome. So it had 2 copies. Now it has 3. It duplicated one of those copies. Now it has 3 copies. And because of that, whatever developmental shifts it had, it now reproduces asexually. It doesn't do it with the original population. So it's a subset of the original population, but can no longer interbreed with the original population.
But
And
has it
per
been
the-
tested? Has that been tested?
Yes.
Like, have you tried interbreeding it?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, they have.
In
Yeah,
fact,
it's
the
been done.
original the original species males will attempt to mate, and in fact sometimes successfully complete the actual active mating with members of what's the genus? Procambarus?
Procambarus
Yeah,
virginalis.
Procambarus
Yeah,
virginalis.
The new one is virginalis, the old one is phallax.
Right. So male Procambarus phallax
suggestive.
members will in fact complete the entire act of mating with members of Procambarus virginalis, but they will be incapable of actually producing viable offspring with members of Procambarus virginalis.
Yes. This has been documented like under laboratory and aquarium conditions, because this happened as a result of one of these who was in an aquarium back in the 90s. That's how they tracked it all the way back to like where the original member was from, which is really cool if you think about it.
Yeah, it's wild.
Okay, well, I can see where this is going now, because quite often what you will find is that a lot of different species are extremely difficult to breed in captivity. They actually require their natural habitat to successfully breed.
Oh, it
And
does
so-
also live in the wild, though.
And so, yes, but so by the time you've actually taken it out of its natural habitat and made it have to subsist in these man-made artificial conditions, you're probably going to find that man's hand in this intervention and observation is probably as equally as responsible for what you're observing as it is.
So it was not selected by humans for any features. It was literally just, this is a normal crawfish, normal Procambarus phallax, then that had in one of its eggs or sperm this mutation, which caused the first Procambarus virginalis. And this happened, and there was no selection by people for it. It just happened. And then it got into the environment. And again, because there's been all this genetic tracing within these populations. And now it's in the environment, and it's invasive. It's actually better at existing in the environment where its ancestral population lives than the ancestral population, which is why it's beating them in a lot of places. It's a highly invasive species now.
I understand that selective breeding within a species
Isn't selective breeding.
No, we weren't.
leads towards the
There
most
was no selective breeding.
We
most
know for a fact
advantageous.
where this came from, and there was no selective breeding. So we're going to go work past
Well, it
selective
was
breeding.
selective breeding because that's what nature does.
No?
Nature is
Okay,
always
fine. If you want to say
selective
that natural selection counts as selective breeding, then okay. But
Yeah.
do realize that the normal parlance that people use when they say selective breeding is
artificial.
breeding by humans
Right.
to create.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Oh, I'm not saying that at all.
Okay, fair enough. Sorry.
Okay. Natural
Okay.
selection
Okay.
Right.
is obviously has a big hand in what nature is going to do.
Okay.
But
Right.
it's still not creating a new species as such, just because one particular gene dominates over another, and eventually
Not what's
replaces
happening
the
here.
weak gene. It is still a crawfish or
What you're describing is
Yeah, whatever
allele
it's
fixation, and what is happening here is speciation. Now, it's very rapid speciation, which is not the most common kind. However,
Right.
it
It's
is
just
a
one
dramatic example of speciation because, remember, you yourself define species as a group of organisms that can interbreed with each other to create fertile offspring. That's the breeding population type Meyer definition. And it's the one that you said that you liked. And while it's true that there are areas of biology where it's a little tricky to apply that definition, it's generally not tricky with crustaceans. And we have a case here where we have a new population of crustaceans which cannot produce fertile offspring with members of the population from which it sprang. They'll try, and they'll fail. Which means that by the definition you agreed to, we have a new species. So there's only two options. You can admit that speciation happens, or you can amend your definition of species. But if you amend it, I caution you to make one that actually can be reasonably applied to the various things people know of as species. If you come up with something that we can't apply, then we're just going to have to say you can't really use that definition because it doesn't make any sense. So would you like to either redefine species or admit speciation?
I think you're trying to back me into a corner here and say
I absolutely
that I
am. That is 100% true.
on what I've said, and I won't recant on what I've said whatsoever, because what defines a species is something that is able to reproduce itself, and this thing is still reproducing itself. Whether or not it's able to breed with
no one is saying it's not a
the
species.
colonies
No one is saying Procambarus virginalis isn't a species.
It doesn't create.
Everyone knows Procambarus virginalis is a species.
The term species, that itself is just a as I say, it's a division between what is.
I agree with you, but that argument doesn't help you. I'll tell you that. Like I can give a better I can give a set of really good arguments for why like species is not great in a lot of instances, but none of those arguments will actually help your position. Right.
But what they show is because it's just a word. Species is just a word. It's linguistics trying to describe reality.
Okay,
reality is what reality
that's great.
Is, no matter what we call it. So if that's what it is, that's what it is. And calling it
so that's fair.
So we can argue back and forth about very pedantic little things
Ross,
about where we're going to name and define words is irrelevant.
Okay, Ross, I'm going to give you another 45 seconds. Hold on. I'm going to give Ross another 45 seconds to finish up, and then because it's been feeling a little rambly, but I don't want to be, I gotta stop. So here's 45 seconds, and then we're going to switch over to Jackson for a bit. Go.
I'm pretty well certain I said what I was going to say.
Okay, fair enough.
By defining things with words, we come to a rigid definition, whereas a species can be very widespread, as we talked about with geckos. They're still called geckos and they're still a species, but not all of them are capable of interbreeding with one another. It doesn't mean they're no longer geckos or they're a different species again. They don't become alligators or crocodiles or goannas or whatever. They're still, basically your little gecko. So, pedantism in the linguistic term of definition of things that mankind does has really nothing to do with the fact that a new species does not evolve from something without still retaining the same characteristics.
All right, and that is 45 seconds. So we are now, what I'm going to do is I am going to give Jackson, I'm going to give you 4 minutes, and here's what I'm going to do.
4 minutes?
4 minutes.
I don't remember. Oh, I should have taken notes. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm going to give you 4 minutes. And there's two things that are going to happen. One, Ross, I'm going to mute you just because I'm about to mute myself and step away because I need more ice because my goodness is it hot right now. So I'm going to give Jackson 4 minutes literally just so I can step away without it becoming too much of an interruption. So I recognize this is completely selfish. It's probably unprofessional, but I'm kind of sweating here, which is weird because I'm a dinosaur and we have aglandular skin. So, okay, here we go. Jackson?
Okay. So, in one sense, I sort of agree with you, Ross, in that the species concept itself is kind of vague and amorphous, and therefore speciation is also going to be vague and amorphous. But the point we were discussing was, that you had raised the issue that like speciation doesn't occur, right? And at the same time, you want to say, well, species are fluid, which it's true. Speciation does occur, and also speciation is a fluid process, or species is a fluid term, right? Like one of the best examples of that is have you ever heard of the Ensatina salamanders of California? Just nod or shake your head. No? Okay, so there are these salamanders in California, and the population like originally started in Oregon and it proceeded south. You know what? It's probably better if I like pull up a map. I'm not sure if you're let me just give you an image of these guys, and then Ensatina.
Sorry, I
no, you're fine.
Myself. It's okay. I'm quite familiar with California because I spent a year there when I was 16.
Oh, okay.
And I know a bit about
um,
axolotls. I've read a few of them myself, and they're
Oh
from
yeah,
Mexico. So
yeah,
I can
I've got
understand
one.
the
He's
salamander chain between the two. I'll mute myself again now.
okay. Um, okay. I just let me show you the picture. It's not just the map. It's also that like the actual thing itself. So let me see if this will work. Let me see if I can share on Dapper's stream because I may be able to. We'll see. All right. So, can you see my screen? You can unmute yourself to say yes or no.
The screen
see
is
that?
up. Yep. Everyone should be able
Okay,
to see
so here at the top we have. So these are all technically members of one species, Ensatina escholtzi. Now, the names under them are the quote subspecies. You have Organensis, Picta, etc. But so this population starts at the top and it spreads downward and it goes around the Central Valley.
Can I just
And
say,
so-
though, that Xanthopicta, or Xanthoptica, sorry, is adorable. And I want 10 of them.
Granted, but moving on. So it's
Sorry.
so the it's okay, Dad. But so the population, the inland population, is what we call is called blotched, and the coastal population is called unblotched. And so you can see they both start the Picta and Platensis, they both start up here at the top, and they're fairly similar. So you have kind of these orange and brown blotches on the Platensis, and then it's the unblotched population for Picta, and then as you go south, you have Xanthoptica, or however you pronounce that.
I think
And then-
Xanthoptica is right.
Escholtzi on this side. So these are all the unblotched. And then Platensis, Cruciator, and Clawberry, those are all the blotched. So as you get farther south, you have these blotched populations. And so Clawberry, where it co-occurs with Escholtzi, they cannot interbreed. But Picta and Platensis can interbreed at the start of this ring. So this is what's called a ring species. So the whole thing is one species. But because they go around this barrier, the Central Valley, which is very hot, it's so I hear. I've been to California like once.
Oh, it is
And
very,
it was
very
very
hot.
cold.
That
It was
valley.
cold when I went. So.
Okay, well, in the winter it can get very cold, but that valley actually contains the place on Earth with the highest recorded surface temperatures outside of volcanoes.
So there you go. It's very hot. And these guys are amphibians, so they need a degree of watery area to raise their offspring. So they have migrated around this, and so though they can interbreed at the top of this ring, they can no longer interbreed at the bottom. The Clawberry cannot interbreed with Escholtzi, but they're the same species, right? Even though Clawberry can interbreed with Cruciator and Escholtzi can interbreed with Xanthoptica.
And I'm going to point out,
There
Ross,
is no cross.
if you want to respond, you are going to have to unmute yourself because I can mute people, but I can't unmute them, which is a weird thing that StreamYard does, and I don't understand it, but whatever.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, go ahead. What are your thoughts on this, Ross?
I find that highly interesting. Apart from the
Okay.
fact that you're talking about going down or whatever, because there's, as we know, there's no up or down in space, which was
Right,
basically
but
the
I'm just
topic of the debate in
referring
the
to
first place.
I'm just referring
But,
to the top and the bottom on the map.
This picture has an up and
that's
down.
all, I digress.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I do find that highly interesting, and I do see that there is a differentiation of various species, as you say, due to physical locations and the way
Mhm.
that they certain ones get selected for successful breeding due to their environment that they're in.
Mhm.
And so I actually find it quite interesting that you say that they are the same species if they're incapable.
Well, I
of
don't say
breeding.
this. This is what the herpetologists say. This is not me in particular saying. This is them saying that.
So maybe
But
they
that's
just
why
find
it's
it
called
unattractive or something, and say, "Ooh,
Well-
you stink." Well, yeah, maybe you smell. You have different olfactory nerves than what I
But
have.
in either case, you end up with an isolated breeding population that doesn't breed back and that can then further develop. And an interesting thing is, let's say that through some event, right, like humans suck. Let's say that they hunted to extinction all of the subspecies except the two at the bottom of the image, Escholtzi and is that an L? Is it Clawberry?
Clawberry.
Clawberry?
Yeah, Clawberry, however you pronounce it.
So
I like that.
all the rest of them are gone. There is no reason in that circumstance why anyone wouldn't then say that those two are different species. They look different. They have at least somewhat different behavior. They don't interbreed. it seems like they can't, based on the studies that have been done.
Mhm.
So we right now, the only reason that Escholzi and Cloberry are put under the same species is because in this continuum going up north, everyone else can interbreed. So,
Okay.
but if you were to get rid of those, you would now have two completely different species. Well, I mean, not completely different; they're both still salamander species, but two
That's exactly
incompatible.
right.
They're
They're both
separate
still
species.
But
salamanders.
that's what evolution predicts. It says once you have the first group of animals that you can reasonably call salamanders, all of their offspring from now until they all go extinct, hopefully very far in the future, because I like salamanders, will all be salamanders. Similarly, once you have the first population that can be reasonably called mammals, which is the ancestor of all extant mammals, all of their offspring into the however long in the future mammals persist will all be mammals. Evolution doesn't say that a salamander is going to turn into a crocodile. It says that salamanders and crocodiles have a common ancestor that itself was neither a salamander or a crocodile, but what it was is a tetrapod. And both salamanders and alligators remain tetrapods, as will all of their offspring from here until the end of tetrapods. Hopefully, again, a very long time from now.
Yeah, but you're basically saying though, if we travel back far enough in time,
Mhm.
that we still had a common ancestor with those things as
Yeah.
well.
Yes.
And and to me, that's basically it. Yeah, it's a bit like every gap in the heliocentric model is filled with the god of gravity. This is filled with the god of Chronos or time. You just fill it with enough time, and this is possible.
No.
But
So
I just totally disagree. I think that each mammal, each variety of mammal, has pretty much descended from its own variety, and though they may have a certain amount of variations just as much as the salamanders do, to the point where some can no longer interbreed with one another, they have still inherited the same basic genetic structure that they began with and did not change into a whole different species.
Jackson, are you
Yeah.
showing me mammal cladograms?
God dang it, it's too small. Well, he said he was making a claim, which is
I know, but the
wrong.
question stands. Are you right now showing me a cladogram of mammals? Because, man, I'm into it.
Okay. Yes, I was trying to find. Hold on. Can we see this one? Because I'm trying to make it bigger.
That's always the trick. I love it when Google Images is like,
There we
oh,
go.
this is like a 3,000 by 2,000 image. And you're like, okay, open a new tab. And it's like 500 by 300. It's like, well, why did you lie to me, Google? Sorry.
I like this one because it has Atlantogenata and
Lorenzotheria?
Nope. I don't like this one. It has
Ah.
Carnivora and Perissodactyla sister. Anyway, we're gonna use it anyways.
Wait,
Regardless.
it does? Come on,
Yeah,
guys.
well, okay,
Ferungulata.
that's-
Ferae.
I forgot my
Exactly,
magnifying glass.
Carnivora for the win. Oh, I'm
I'll
sorry.
take
Here,
the word
actually, I
like
can make it a little bit larger. So,
Ooh.
so for instance, if we look at,
Hmm.
I don't know, they put a whole bunch of primates in here.
This is a little
Well, go to
outdated, but
Go for dolphin, cow, pig. That was an interesting one. I mean, how the heck
Okay.
does an animal go to become a land animal to then go back to being able to
that is a great
swim in
question.
the
I
ocean and
love
breathe
that
through the back of
question.
its head and develop flippers and tails?
So that's actually a very, very good question that you have. We would be happy to discuss that.
In fact,
that's
that
very
is such a
fun-
good question that was a puzzle for biologists for a very long time. And I love that question. This is actually one of the reasons that I like discussing evolution, even with people who don't accept it. It's because they still ask wonderful questions that prompt things like this, because who doesn't want to take a look at Indohyus or Dorudon? And if the answer is you
How,
in
how
the
did
chat
their
there,
nostrils go to the back of their head? That's what I'd like to know.
we're about to display that.
Oh, actually, we can talk specifically about that. So if you look right
Or
here,
single breather.
Can you zoom in a bit?
it's I can try. Is it? It might get a little bit.
Yep.
Is that okay? All right.
It looks good to me.
All right. So here, so if we're looking at Pakicetus, which is, so you have hippos, which is the sister group of whales, the extant sister group of whales. Indohyus, but they're not really showing the skull for it, and they have Pakicetus with the skull here. So if you look at Pakicetus, look at the second skull has a nose way down here at the very tip. This is the common.
So-
this is the plesiomorphic condition.
But
for
how can you
mammals.
make that connection if they're so far removed from one another?
What do you mean?
This is just assumption, isn't it?
What
Pure
are you
assumption.
referring to specifically?
Yeah, we need to know the antecedent for this.
Well, the leap from one to the next.
What leap?
So these are we're showing these as sister to each other rather than direct relatives, because the odds that they are
Yeah. So,
that any of
so
these
how do
are
we know they're not
directly
just other
relatives.
species which existed, which no longer exist? And to say that they went from
Well, they
one to
are.
another is pure assumption. It's
Well, we're not
there's
saying these went
absolutely
from
no
one to
evidence to
another.
say that this is how it went.
Okay, hold on.
Well, we're not saying.
Hold on. There was some crosstalk,
Okay.
so I want to make sure that we get this. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to try and summarize what I think Ross is saying, and if I get it wrong, I want you to tell me, so you can go again, and I can try again to make sure that we all get this, because I really hate it when we talk past each other. It doesn't help anyone. So what I understand your question to be, Ross, and please, again, tell me if I'm wrong, is you are skeptical of the idea that this sequence represents ancestors and descendants.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jackson, please address that.
So it doesn't. All of these
That's right.
are, in a sense, cousins of each other's. So when people are making phylogenies, what they're looking for are things called synapomorphies. Have you ever heard that term?
Not personally, no.
So synapomorphy is a character that a set of species or a set of taxa share, right? So for instance, a synapomorphy of tetrapoda is that they are four-limbed, with some exceptions like whales and snakes, but they are descended from ancestors, and in their development, they either develop four limbs at some point, or they have the genes still today for developing four limbs, as in fact whales and snakes do.
Okay, if you don't mind, I'll just address that. Isn't that like a huge jump of faith or assumption to say that
Is
this is
what?
what happened?
It's
To
no.
say that
So
some
can I
went this way, some went
continue?
that way. It fits your narrative, but there's absolutely zero evidence that this is what happened between species.
Okay, hold on. We have a super chat, and I want to get through those as they come because I don't want to read a whole bunch of them at the end. Carrie Bronson for $5. Thank you very much, Carrie. Says, why must the fantastic beard be wasted on this guy? Which I actually don't think is fair. Now, I know that Ross and I have vast disagreements, but there are some people who I have vast disagreements with who I actually get on pretty well. Another one was Finding Truth, who was on my channel a few days ago. And I put Ross in the same category. Do I think Ross is right about virtually any of the things that he says in terms of biology or geography or astronomy? No. However, I like Ross. I think Ross is a cool dude. The same is true for Finding Truth. Like, for instance, Ross and I were chatting about beer before and a little bit after the debate, and I think we both have an appreciation of that beverage. On the other hand, Finding Truth and I like to chat about things like how we take coffee, because as it turns out, Finding Truth is from the Middle East, and they're very serious about their coffee out there. So you can have a conversation like you have a conversation about beer, about coffee with someone from the Middle East. And we've had those conversations. We don't always have to have these contentious things. So I reject the idea that beard, that majestic, wonderful beard, is wasted on Ross. It is not, because Ross, despite our disagreements, is still a cool dude in my book until he proves otherwise.
Thank you, sir.
You are quite welcome, Ross.
So should I go on?
Yes, please. I just wanted to make sure that we got the super chat in, and
that
I defended the honor of Ross and his beard.
There you go. There you have it, folks.
Try not to upset any subspecies of birds either.
So if we're talking about humans, for instance, humans have a set of synapomorphies, right? We have a set of characters that define us as a species, right? Chimps have a set of synapomorphies that define them as a species, to the exclusion of humans and all other great apes. However, there is also a set of synapomorphies that defines the clade that unites both of us, which is called hominini, right?
Which is not a kind of pasta.
It is not. That's correct. So things like being partially bipedal, having certain hip joints, and having certain ankle joints and wrist joints, and where our spine fits into our skull and all this sort of stuff. These are all synapomorphies of our clade hominina or hominini. And then there are also synapomorphies that we share in common with gorillas. Now the question is, can we use, and I ask you, this it's not just rhetorical, I'm asking you, can we use these synapomorphies to unite our species or any species with other species? Do you think we can do that, Ross?
When you say unite,
Like they share a common ancestor. Let me rephrase it that way. To say that they probably did share a common ancestor in the past.
okay, no, I think what that alludes to is that we may have originated from a common blueprint, which all life originates from, but I don't think it was done through the methods that we're talking about here, which you call selective breeding and isolation and branching off into different species. I personally think that every particular species was originally created, whether you think through divine intervention, intelligent design, or created in a laboratory, whichever way you think of it, it was done in such a way that that species, that individual species, was created perfect from the beginning. It didn't evolve from a lower life form into a higher life form. It was created as it was from the start, and then it was successfully able to then interbreed and branch off into different things, but it didn't ever really change species as such, even if some of them became like the salamander, unable to interbreed with one another because they'd branched off so far. They were still salamanders. And I think that's the same with every particular thing. And I like to basically go back to, say, the bird, for example, with its feather. If the feather was imperfect to give it flight from the beginning, then there was no reason then why.
Oh, Ross, you're on my channel. This is a dangerous place to go. I'm just letting you know.
I won't be long. I'll just
no. It's fine that you're long. I'm just saying you're wandering into a channel that does a lot of content about things like feathers and birds and whatnot. So just be careful.
Yeah. Okay, so for a bird then to present itself with an entire plumage of perfectly working feathers to give it flight in the first place, that means it had to work in the first place. If it took thousands upon thousands of generations of slowly, as I like to say, dragging through the mud or through the thorn bushes or whatever, where it wasn't actually giving it the advantage of flight to escape from its predators, then the chances of it evolving into a feather in the first place are far less likely than it probably would have just stayed as little scales of a reptile slinking through cracks in rocks to escape predators. So for birds in their own right to exist and the feather to exist tells me that if it wasn't created perfect from the very beginning, then the chances of it evolving otherwise are so slim that it's impossible.
So may I respond?
Please, because if you don't, I'll have to. And I will take up the rest of the week responding to the feather thing if people let me.
Okay, so I mean, yeah, you definitely will. I know you know a lot about this topic, a lot more than I do. But so, Ross, if I told you, for instance, so here is like a sort of crude outline of the evolution of feathers. If I told you, for instance, well, first of all, feathers were not used originally for flight.
Correct.
Feathers being used for flight was a later development. They were not originally used for that purpose. They were originally probably used for sexual selection and insulation. Then later they came to be used for flight. They were co-opted.
Well, later brooding, then even later flight.
Right. Okay, so one thing I want to... So, okay, well, here's the thing, though. Here's how we know it's not just a story. So if I were to ask you, for instance, would you find it significant if I were to tell you, hey, we have this idea of how we think feathers evolved. We predict if this is, in fact, the correct series.
Oh, hey, hold up a second. This is an ontological series, not a phylogenetic series.
Well, as I said, I'm not a feather person. Look, here you have...
Actually, the top left is a good phylogenetic series.
That one? Okay.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Okay, so... As I said, you know more about this than I do. The point that I'm trying to make is so it's not just a story because we can make predictions about it. If I tell you, for instance, hey, this is what we think happened. Now we propose it also went through a stage, say between 2 and 3, we're going to call it 2.5. It had to have gone through stage 2.5 before it got to stage 3. And you say, and we say, okay, well, we expect this to have happened. And then we go out and we find a fossil that has stage 2.5 feathers. What would you say to that? Would you say that's just a coincidence? It's just an accident?
Which, by the way, we have.
We have done that. Yeah, it happened with Bpiosaurus. We actually found an intermediate step in feather evolution.
It's happened more than just Bpiosaurus, which is, I think, how it's... I don't know. Who cares?
You know what, Dapper?
No, Jackson, I don't even know either. Because you know what? They give weird names to dinosaurs, and I hate it just as much as everyone else. Also, they wasted the name Thanos on a dinosaur that didn't deserve it.
I mean, that's fair. That is fair. But
okay,
but
sorry, keep going.
The point is, we did this. We made a prediction about what we should find based on how we think the evolution of feathers should have occurred. Now, do you consider that significant, Ross?
I consider that if you've got expectations you want to find, that you'll find a way of finding it. Yeah, it could be just...
That is not at all what I asked.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second, guys.
It could just be a matter of the fact that this particular feather was highly disrupted in the event. I
want everyone to hold on a second.
Got set in stone, and that's going to give you what you're expecting to find. It doesn't mean for 1 minute that it is going to evolve into a perfect feather without any particular reason to do so. You have to give something a reason to improve, and basically these improvements are said to come about as mutations, as opposed to...
You completely sidestep the question.
Well,
I want to step in here for a second, which I know I'm sort of kind of moderating, but let's be honest, this is an after show. I do what I want.
It's okay, Dapper. It's
okay.
Your channel. You can do whatever you want.
Exactly. Well, I can't do whatever I want. If this were the actual formal debate part, I would hold myself to a very, very high moderator standard. So, okay, Ross. Is it your contention that people looked at the Bpiosaurus, I don't know, whatever, fossil, which is a Therizinosaurus, so we can actually probably broaden this thing to Therizinosauria broadly. It probably has this type of feather. And they made up the integumentary structures that they saw in the fossil. They misinterpreted it, despite the fact that they were examining it with things like scanning electron microscopes that can have absurdly high levels of magnification. Like, what do you actually physically think happened with the researchers who found this fossil specimen in the actual real world that we all experience, took it back to a lab, and examined it with high precision microscopes that are so precise that even light that you can see from a regular microscope can't replicate this? They went to the point where they were like, hey, we're going to shoot ridiculous tiny beams of electrons and measure the not even micrometer, like we're talking like picometer level precision here. What do you think they did? Did they lie?
I'm just saying that what they've observed is something that obviously didn't survive through the generations to become successful at reproduction, because it lacked the abilities to do so, whereas the things that already had the successful things obviously didn't turn into fossils, and they survived to become the birds that we see today because they were created that way from the very beginning. They didn't just evolve from some unsuccessful something stuck in the mud to turn into a fossil.
I don't understand your counter here.
Are you? So I think. Can I ask a question, Ross?
Please.
Are you implying? Because maybe I'm confused, and that is entirely possible. But that each stage. So like the modern flight feather is stage 5 down here, right? So are you saying that these other stages were not like useful? Is that what you're saying? They were not useful to the bird or the bird ancestor?
Well, obviously, if it turned into a fossil, then no, it wasn't very effective.
So
the ones who were already successful didn't turn into fossils because they...
So, hold on. Ross, you know we have fossils of extant species, right?
by
Pompeii.
which you mean.
So extant means that it's still around, right? We have fossils of species that still exist.
Sure.
So being a fossil has nothing to do with whether or not you persisted or were successful. It just happens to be that that particular individual died in a circumstance which taphonomically allowed preservation, and then the geology allowed for us to find it.
Yeah, but it doesn't
Now,
mean that the descendants of its brothers and sisters, for example, then successfully kept on breeding in such a manner that those weird aberrations of things that you think slightly resemble feathers eventually became perfect feathers.
Okay, but it
from
also
genetic
means they
inheritance
didn't.
of random mutations that somehow became that.
Okay, but it also means also doesn't mean that they didn't do that, right? Finding a fossil tells you nothing about the success of the fossil species that you just found, right? That it's a fossil doesn't tell you that it was successful or not. It just tells you that this individual, who was a member of a population, was preserved. Now, there's a couple things here. One is, evolution neither requires nor precludes that sister groups to what we now see go extinct. So, for instance, in some cases, we don't have the whole transitional series living. So for birds, we don't have the whole transition from basically basal reptiles in the sense of like diapsids all the way to modern birds.
You know an example in which we do, though, have modern examples.
I do have an interesting example of where we have modern examples going from very basic versions to very weird, derived, highly unusual versions.
Do you?
I do.
Do you, Dapper? Is that a fact?
It's a particular family of fish, which, by the way, happened to be from the area that Ross is from.
Whoa.
Sygnathidae. The seahorses and related pipefish and sea dragons, where you have the seahorse, right, that has a prehensile squared-off tail with these intricate interlocking bony and cartilaginous plates. It propels itself by use of its single dorsal fin. It has a brood pouch where the males become pregnant, kind of. And all of these very unusual adaptations.
I've actually successfully bred seahorses too.
Honestly, that's really cool. However, really cool. We also have animals in Sygnathidae who lack the prehensile tail, but they still mostly propel themselves vertically with dorsal fin, and they have brood pouches. We also have animals who don't really propel themselves, who don't have brood pouches, but who kind of propel themselves a bit with their dorsal fin, but who also swim back and forth. We also have animals that, like the pipefish, who don't necessarily have brood pouches, who don't propel themselves with their dorsal fin, and who don't have prehensile tails. So we have the entire series in Sygnathidae. So we do have examples where the entire, essentially, evolutionary quote-unquote lineage in morphological terms is still alive. And we have examples where we have fossil evidence of similar lineages, but they are no longer extant. So why is that a big deal? And before we answer, I want to acknowledge another super chat, which, thank you very much, Silver Harlow for $5 says, are you familiar with with the Soritis paradox and how it might apply to speciation? Note to Dapper, Greek word pronounced accordingly. Oh, Soritis, I guess I did. I am not. I'm not sure who that question is for. Is anyone here familiar with the Soritis paradox?
Nope.
Never.
Sorry. Looks like no one here is. If you want to clarify, Silver Harlow, please tag me in there so that I like it catches my eye. And I do want to say a real quick thank you to people who were super chatting. Look, this is not a channel that I do just for the money. However, it really helps the channel keep going. I'll
take my cut too, thanks, Dapper.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, it really is a big help. So I really do appreciate it, and that's why I do things like thank my patrons. Okay. Oh, hey, look at that.
Here's one. So you have the whole. Oh wait, let me.
Remember, this whole series is in living alive. Animals, right? So this is the development of. Oh, can you go back? Yeah. So this is the development of what's called the brood pouch in seahorses. So as you know, because I mean you've bred them, so you obviously you know, right? the male seahorse is the one that carries the eggs until they hatch and inside of a pouch on his abdomen, basically. So this is what we would expect to see from basal pipefish on the left to what we currently have for the seahorses on the right. Now, if we didn't have the intermediates in the middle, that doesn't mean it didn't happen. But interestingly, every single middle option that you see here is actually represented by a currently existing species. We have the entire sequence. So we know that at every stage it works. So on the left, we don't have any brood pouch behavior, right? But
You just glue the eggs to the abdomen.
Right. But as we get to the next step, we get to slightly more derived pipefish, where there's an unfolding of skin that doesn't completely enclose the young, but it gives them a little extra protection. It's better than just being glued on to the abdomen, right? Then we have, you just have a little, you just close it off in the next step. And again, we have living organisms.
What you're doing here is you're telling a cool story, but all you're
No,
showing
we have it.
No, these are all real animals.
A bunch of species that are quite similar to one another, and each is successful in their own right. But it doesn't necessarily show a sequence just because it appears to be one, because our brains love to follow patterns, and we think, oh, well, this one became this one, and that became that, and that became that.
No, they
it
didn't
doesn't mean that at all. It
become
just
each
means
other.
those ones were successful in what they're currently doing at reproducing itself, and it's still working. And if it didn't work, it would go extinct. But it doesn't mean that it was an intermittent step between one and the other. It just means that each and every single one of them, created as they were, works perfectly fine. And it still works to this day. And if it didn't, then they'd be one of the extinct species amongst the many millions and billions that have gone extinct since the beginning of time, while the successful ones are still successfully doing what they do. And while they may make local adaptations, like, for example, Darwin's finches, simply because a particular seed flourished for those ones with the beaks best able to crack that seed, became the most dominant of that species, it doesn't mean that they're still anything but finches. They just become the most successful in that given environment.
Hold up. I want to reiterate this. And it's one of the things that is most frustrating in terms of misunderstandings of evolution by anti-evolutionists. When you say they're still finches, what you are doing is confirming a very important prediction of evolution, which is to say that organisms cannot leave their ancestral clades. This is called the law of monophyly, right? Once a clade is established, and a clade is just a group of organisms that share a common ancestor, right? Some of them have names, some of them don't. Many of them do.
What's that word? Clade?
Clade. A clade is a group of organisms that share a common ancestor.
Clade.
So, for instance, let's say all of your cousins and you form a clade because you share common ancestry. That's a bit oversimplified, but there you go. So another example might be.
Yeah, no, that's all. I just couldn't quite understand the word.
Oh,
clade.
it's CLADE.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. So the law of monophyly says once a clade is established, organisms cannot remove themselves from it. So finch, as broadly defined to include tanagers, which is what the Darwin's finches actually are, unless I'm wrong, Jackson.
You are correct. They are tanagers, not actually finches.
Right, but tanagers and finches are sister groups, right?
Well, they're both within Passeriformes. They're close, but they're not quite. There's a few other like minor groups, but they're close. They're close to each other.
All right. Well, fair enough. But one of the things that evolution says is once you establish a clade, in this case, tanagers, say, all your descendants will always be tanagers. They will never, ever, no matter how much they change, ever not be. That's one of the reasons why we say things like whales are artiodactyls, which is the even-hoofed, which is, again, not a great description, but it's okay. The even-hoofed ungulates, right? Those are the artiodactyls. Whales are still artiodactyls, even though their anatomical features that make them artiodactyls are currently somewhat obscured by their extreme adaptations to aquatic life. It's why if you have a group of spiders, they'll never become not spiders. They will always be spiders from now until they go extinct. And this is the part that's frustrating for me is that this is the second time I've said it in this conversation. And I really, really, really want to bring this home. You don't have to agree with this, but what I want you to do is acknowledge that it is the position of the people who are promoting science which you disagree with, which is, I mean, you're allowed to, but it is their position that finches will always be finches, tanagers will always produce tanagers, dogs will always produce dogs, humans will always produce humans, but within those groups, new clades will arise, so you will get new varieties of tanagers. And new varieties of tanagers will themselves give rise to new varieties within that new subvariety. And so diversity will increase, but you do not ever get to escape your ancestry, even if you change morphologically to an extremely high degree. And I don't want you to agree right now. I just want you to acknowledge it, that is the position.
Tell you flat out that you're absolutely wrong.
I don't care if I'm wrong. Hold on.
I don't disagree with science whatsoever.
Okay.
What I disagree with, though, however, is pseudoscience. And so
You're not addressing what he said.
Claim is made, such as the ones
Ross,
that you
I'm going to have to mute you for a second.
Then,
please unmute yourself pretty soon.
I've actually.
Oh, sorry. I'm not asking you to agree with me. It's great if you think I'm wrong. That's okay. I am not asking you to agree. Okay, fine.
What happened? Did he
Oh,
leave?
he left.
Oh, tragic. All right, well then I will stop sharing.
Okay. This is one of the things that I find the most frustrating is it's not that I'm asking you to agree with me. I'm asking you to stop strawmanning me. Right? Acknowledge that your opponents have the position they have and stop pretending that they don't. If you have to pretend your opponent doesn't have the position that they do, you're not here to have a discussion. And honestly, that's the kind of thing that ends up convincing me that you're not a guy that I would go have a beer with. There you
have it, folks.
It hasn't quite gotten to that part. Oh, hey, David P. Neff is back. Oh, sorry. I accidentally unadded you for a second.
He rage quit.
Yeah. So I want to give this to anyone who might disagree with me, who is in the audience or who might ever watch this. You are allowed to disagree with me. You are not allowed to pretend that my position is something that it's not. That's a pretty basic thing.
And of course, and if you're going to argue with someone, argue against the actual position they hold, not some Strawman version of it.
Exactly. And I don't know how else to say it. If you're not going to argue against the position I hold, at first that might just be a mistake. But when I correct you on it, you need to fix it. And this is one of the things, it's one of the reasons that there are a few things that can more quickly make me lose respect for you as a person to talk to than continuing to strawman me after I have corrected you on it. And the George said, FEAJ is an embarrassingly despicable human being. You have the patience of a saint. Well, as I said to Mr. P earlier on a different stream that I wasn't live on, but that I was in the chat for, FEAJ is way better than, say, Nathan Thompson, who harasses school children.
Oh god, I cannot stand Nathan Thompson.
Oh, we're not going to turn this into a Nathan Thompson discussion. I'm just going to point out that as flat earthers go, FEA, which I think he has largely dropped the J, so I'm not going to keep going with it, is...
Have there been any F-bombs on this channel, in this stream yet?
I don't want to answer that question, so you're going to have to risk it.
Okay, well, I'm not going to risk it since I don't have $10 to give you, so...
There you go, then just don't say it. But what were you going to say? And you can use other words.
I would say, F Nathan Thompson. I will never debate him. I will never talk to him. I will never platform him, and I will never give him a single iota of my views.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And actually, look, I don't want to get into it now, but I had an embarrassingly long discussion on Cheshire Vic's channel in her chat, and I wish perhaps that I hadn't because it was completely off topic, but with a mod for modern day debate about why it is that you can't ever make comments about the debater is maybe not the best policy in all cases, But that's really neither here nor there. But my example was in fact Nathan Thompson as to why you might have a debater on whom you could reasonably allow a discussion of the person themselves. But hey, sorry, it's not my channel, and I'm not going to tell James that he has to change his moderation style for me. That's not my place. And I don't think that it's like morally incorrect to make the moderation choices that he has. I think it might be unwise, but you're allowed to be unwise. FEAJ is now FEA Ross. That's from Brilliant. Sometimes. So he's been going by Ross. I've heard him sometimes call himself Flat Earth Aussie Roscoe or just Flat Earth Aussie. So I just try to either call him Ross or Flat Earth Aussie because those are both things he's gone by. And so I don't know. I know that he has he's been trying to drop the J, the Jesus, because it was originally Flat Earth Aussie Jesus. But as I said to him in an earlier stream, I do think that the bare minimum that you afford to someone that you have any kind of respect for is to call them what they want to be called. With possible exceptions of someone calling themselves something that's like absurdly obscene or something, right? Sorry. So, but generally speaking, unless there's a compelling reason not to, and it better be really compelling, you should call people what they want to be called. And Flat Earth Aussie no longer wants to be called Flat Earth Aussie Jesus, so I won't call him that.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So, Jackson, how is Rocks 2 coming along?
If one more person asks me about that goddamn book, I will cut someone.
All right.
No, I'm sorry. Look, now, David. The
good
Yes.
The good Neff. It's coming. All right. Look, we are working on. RJ's working on his chapter. He's getting all of his stuff. He had to like reorganize a very large amount of papers for this chapter. And I was actually writing. I put out like a couple of pages just a couple of days ago. Because you know what we didn't have in the first book? We did not talk at all about about Darwin's doubt. So I realized, I mean, in part, it's okay because we had a few things on the chopping block already, and also the book is supposed to be predominantly about like answers in Genesis. Like the title itself is a retort to Ken Ham, and so, but it's coming. It'll be out when it's out.
All right, guys. So at this point, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for the next not couple, but the next few minutes or so, I'm going to allow for questions to come in, and I'm going to use the intermission video, and we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to conduct some biological functions, and also, again, refill this drink because I cannot go through cold drinks fast enough because it's really hot, because it's the desert and summer. So I'm going to use the intermission video, and we will be back in about 4-ish minutes. And so get ready with questions. If you super chat questions, you can just put them in whenever. But if you want to not super chat and still have a question asked, I want you to hold on to that question until we come back from the intermission. Because if you don't, I probably won't see it. And then I also want you to tag me at the beginning or end of the question so that I make sure that it like hits my eyes as a significant thing, right? So here comes the intermission, and I will be right back, as I hope will David and Jackson.
I want to take a moment to talk about something serious. There is a problem facing late surviving non-avian dinosaurs in modern America. Hunting is very strictly regulated, and only allowed at certain times of the year. This means that for much of the year we have to rely on farm-raised food, which means money. If you want to help a starving dinosaur, please consider donating on Patreon or buying from my merch store. Links are in the description. Please help. Dinosaurs all over YouTube are depending on you to help them through the hunting off-season.
Oh, Nani? Dare? Oh, Gojira desu ka? Hai, Gojira-san. Hai.
All right, we are back from the intermission. Thank you, everyone, for bearing with us. And yes, as Sean Carroll says, it is Gojira. I tried my hardest to put on my most accurate Japanese accent, which, by the way, Japanese is a language that I guess I can't say I haven't studied it, but like I speak essentially no Japanese. I know like a dozen words in Japanese, and I barely know the first thing about the grammar of Japanese. Like, okay, isolating noun class particles, I think. And that's about as far as it goes. Oh, formality registers. I also know that that's a thing. But yeah, that's about as far as my Japanese goes. So yeah, that's all. Anyway, so we are now opening it up to questions for a bit. We are probably going to be on for, depending on how many questions we get, maybe 20-ish minutes max. So, because I do want to get this thing out of here before 2 hours, because like I said, I'm going on my 6th hour live, and I was doing other stuff before that, so yeah.
But were you though?
I was actually.
Allegedly.
Actually, the day before today, I spent
I don't think you're real.
7 hours recording audio, something like that.
I think you're not even real, Dapper.
Well, that's possible. I mean, I am CGI.
just like the Earth.
Although, actually, now that Ross is gone, I should probably switch to a different webcam. This is not me switching pre-recorded videos or anything. This is just me switching to a different camera. There you go. For $5 from Carrie Bronson. If you could fast forward time to see the heat death of the universe, would you want to? I honestly want to know, all joking about void worship aside. Only if I can also rewind it. If I have to fast forward it to heat death and then I'm just stuck there, no. That sounds terrible.
Wait, also, are you like immune to the effects of the heat death?
I don't think you would be, but then again, I think you would just still exist in whatever like state you were, at least temporarily. Like you would arrive alive and awake, but unless you're inside some kind of like time traveling pod or something. Like, yeah, you're gonna be dead pretty soon. Which I guess so everything else is dead long ago. So I guess you joined them. But you know, Smitty asks, question for Flat Earth Aussie. Aw, baby gonna cry. And so, okay. Until the rage quit after being asked not to lie about me, I would tell you that's not very nice. But the bare minimum for having a conversation with someone, like an actual discussion where you two are going to exchange ideas, is that when you realize that they are telling you that you are misrepresenting their position, you listen and accept what their position actually is. The only exception is when they go back and forth on their position. Essentially, they're equivocating on their position. Then you can call them out on that. But if you are asked to listen to someone describe their position carefully, and you can't even do that, that's a problem.
Indeed.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And to me, that's just dishonest discussion.
It is. So the thing is, I'm hesitant to call people dishonest because one of the things that I think... So my definition for lie, right, is unintentional attempt to deceive another person. So you can't lie to Google because Google isn't a person. The company Google might be a legal person for purposes of things like property ownership and legal liability, but it's not an actual natural person. And when I say person in this context, I mean natural person. So you can't lie to Google. You can't lie to your bank, really, but you can lie to bankers, which, there you go. You can defraud their bank, though. But it has to be an intentional attempt to deceive a person or a group of people. Now, when you try to use use a different version of someone's argument in a discussion, you are trying to deceive the people listening to you. And if there's only you two and you're still doing it, then I don't think you're technically being dishonest, but what you are doing is being a dick. And don't be a dick. It's one of Dapper Dino's life advice things. It's not legal advice, it's just life advice. Don't be a dick.
Dapper, are you giving legal advice? Can we ask you for legal advice? Oh,
you can ask me for legal advice all you want. I will not give you legal advice.
Yeah.
I feel like, though, if I give you $1, you'll give me some legal advice.
I'll tell you what. Send in $1 super chat asking for legal advice and see what happens.
You know what? No, now it sounds like a threat almost.
It's not a threat. It's an invitation.
No, I refuse.
By the way, it's not a threat. It's an invitation. That's a line from The Office.
Yeah.
I've watched like a few episodes of The Office, but
Jackson, what I'm hearing you say to me is that we need to do hangouts off air where I just show you The Office.
No, please. My sister already went through a phase where I had to watch several episodes of it. I'm good.
It's one of the best shows ever made.
I feel like that's entirely subjective.
Check IMDb ratings and Rotten Tomatoes, because it's
which are also subjective.
So here's the thing, right? Sometimes enough people making subjective assessments can actually make objective facts occur. For instance, prices are objective facts about things that are the result of subjective evaluations of the value of objects.
I'm not sure I'd agree that that's objective. It's just, it's subjective and they agree
Also, objective things that are the result of the subjective conclusion of multiple people. Languages.
And
So I'm just saying that enough people coming together with subjective valuations can create things that are objectively true. It happens
I don't
all
follow
the
how
time.
either of those examples are like objective.
Oh, that's because, my friend, we haven't had the full-on discussion about economics and linguistics. That's coming.
That would actually be a really fun conversation to have.
I don't know if it's going to be on air, but Jackson, remember that time that we went over political consent
Dapper,
in
I will
private?
shoot myself before I have that conversation.
By the way, I do want to put my take on Carrie's questions about fast forwarding to the heat death. I wouldn't probably say no to that. However, you know what I would really love to do is be able to take to rewind, to be able to rewind the entire evolutionary history of Earth from the time it was formed to the first life and all the evolutionary process. I think that would be a lot of fun.
We should go see Cambro or Nita, as I posted earlier, Dapper.
I think that says more about you than it does about the organism.
I think it looks like a penis.
I agree. It absolutely looks like a penis. But does it look more like a penis than a penis worm?
Me?
Well, you are the expert. You've done how many videos about penises now?
Explicitly about penises, like one, I think.
That's one more than most people.
That is not false. Although I guess that goes for like making videos in general, though, doesn't it?
Most people who make videos haven't made any videos explicitly about penises.
Okay, but most people haven't made YouTube videos.
Right, but I'm now going with the population of people who have made YouTube videos. Of that group, only a very small portion have ever made videos about penises at all.
I think we should do a poll. How many of you have done videos about penises?
Hey, you know what? It's a very important organ.
It is. I mean, where would we be without it?
Basically the same place birds are, just being messy, but it works anyway.
That's gross.
I'm sorry. I didn't invent birds.
I thought you did. You're a freaking dinosaur, Dapper.
Yeah, I'm a basally branching member of the same clade. I'm not actually a bird.
Then you should have like cleared this with your superiors.
I didn't have any say on the loss of intermittent organisms in avies.
And that sounds like a personal problem.
It's not even my problem because again, not a bird.
But you are in theropoda.
Yes, and theropoda is so having an intermittent organ is plesiomorphic to theropoda almost certainly.
Dapper, I have no other non-avian theropods to talk to. You are the only one. It sounds like to me you are passing the buck on.
I'm not even the only Dapper Dino you could talk to.
What are you talking?
There's the guy who does coding tutorials that I didn't know about until after I created this channel.
Yeah. Fun fact, I actually thought that was one of your other YouTube accounts.
All right, so Ugly German Truth. Oh, sorry, hold on. Ugly German Truth says, "Are they talking about blobfish nose?" I don't think so. He also asks, "Was that just the one about whale peeing for Shannon Q?" Yes.
Yes.
Robert Adsit asks, "Have you not watched Viced Rhino?" Look, Viced Rhino talks about penises a lot, but in videos that aren't about them. Also, I was just on his channel. One of Viced Rhino's videos is a Dapper Dino video now. So.
Yes.
Wait, does Dapper have a Richard is the question I'm going to go ahead and say. And so here's the thing, right? So we're actually going to go into Dinosaur and Archosaur more broadly, intermittent organs. So we have to take a look at birds and crocodilians, who are our extant Archosaurs, right? Because intermittent organs that have no bony component are unlikely to fossilize. So intermittent organ is the generalized term for a male organ that is used to facilitate internal fertilization, because technically only mammals have penises. Okay, so we're going to use intermittent organs. Now, crocodilians have intermittent organs that use erectile tissue that fill with lymphatic fluid as opposed to blood, as is the case in mammalian intermittent organs. Now, we look at birds. Most birds do not have an intermittent organ. They just completely lack it. However, the distribution of intermittent organs is interesting because intermittent organs are near universal in Galloancerae, which is the fowl, the ground and waterfowl. And it is, in fact, universal in paleognaths. So that's the ratites, so it's ostriches, emus, rheas, cassowaries, and tinamous. Those are the paleognath birds. But the thing is that Gallimanceri is basically branching to the rest of Neoaves, or to Neoaves in general, right? So that's things like your passeriforms, your psittaciforms, things like that, which all lack intromittent organs. But when you do and also the birds with intromittent organs, they also use erectile tissue that fills with lymphatic fluid. So, the most parsimonious conclusion is that Neoaves lost the intromittent organ, and that a intromittent organ that uses erectile tissue that uses lymphatic fluid is ancestral to Archosauria, because it's common in both Pseudosuchians and those avians that have the intromittent organ, which again, because of its position phylogenetically, is probably the plesiomorphic condition for aves.
Mm-hmm.
So, the answer to does Ceratosaurus have an intromittent organ is probably...
He's got a pee-pee.
Well, no, because it wouldn't be used for urine.
He's got... No, it's just called a pee-pee.
Okay, fair enough. What about the 1/3 of ducks with the big corkscrew intromittent organs? So that is an interesting thing, because the unusual intromittent organs in Enceridae, which is the family to which the common ducks and swans belong to, they actually have those complicated intromittent organs because their mating is not terribly
Basically
consensual. Rape. Yeah. They're basically designed to make it so that the female cannot extricate herself from the mating event until it's complete.
And it's only in the non-territorial ones. The territorial ones don't have this issue as much. It's not as common in the territorial duck.
Yeah, basically, it's not very YouTube friendly to talk about why those ducks have those strange intromittent organs.
You should read The Evolution of Beauty if you want a book that has a whole chapter dedicated to that topic.
There you go.
By Richard Crum. It's all about birds. And he does talk about dinosaurs. It's a good book.
Well, you can't talk about birds without talking about dinosaurs.
Oh, he talks a little bit about the evolution of feathers. It's mostly about extant birds, but he talks a little bit about like feathers in Microraptor and a few others.
Nice. So, Microraptor is really cool, and the thing that I love about Microraptor is that creationists can't figure out what to do with it because they like to pretend that it's just a bird, but it's in the same family as Velociraptor,
which is also now a bird, thanks to Dr. Menton. Thank you. So
it's kind of like Herman and Lady that they can't figure out what the fuck this is. Oops, sorry.
Does this mean you owe Dapper $10 now?
Maybe, but no, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Dapper, I can't believe you would say no to that. I'm surprised.
Look, I'm an honest kind of guy. We didn't
I would just say, yeah, fork it over.
Look, okay, here's the thing. We didn't have an F-bomb dropped, so no. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie to David. That would put me on the same level as someone who, when being told they're misrepresenting their intellectual opponent, rage quits rather than correcting their assessment. Now, David B22585, which is a lot of numbers, says cloaca. So here's where we talk about cloacas. Cloaca is from the Latin word for sewer, cloaca. And it refers to the common orifice in most most vertebrates we'll go with, right? So fish, as well as most tetrapods, basically all the tetrapods that are not therians, not even all mammals, because monotremes have a cloaca. And it is the single orifice through which mating and most excretion functions occur. Now, there are some exceptions. For instance, mammals excrete via sweat as well as through urine and feces. So also most organisms excrete some waste through their dermal structures. or epidermal structures, I should say. So hair, feathers, scales, those also contain waste products because, I mean, hey, they're getting out of your body anyway. Might as well put some in there, right? But yes, it is the mating orifice as well as the main excretion orifice for waste. And basically everything that you think of as a vertebrate has one except for therian mammals, which is the marsupials along with the placental mammals. There actually was recently the first known paper, the first paper that anyone has ever published describing a non-avian dinosaur cloaca. And it was the cloaca of a Psittacosaurus from a particularly well-preserved specimen. It's the specimen that you might be familiar with as being the basis for the very, very carefully done sculpture that has color information taken from the specimen itself. So we have very good reason to think that that was the actual coloration of the Psittacosaurus in question, which is how we know that they had sort of a counter-shaded body with like dappled dark spots. And they were primarily kind of an orangey brown, which is kind of wild because when most people who are, say, 30 or so were kids, they were told in all their dinosaur books that we'll probably never know what color any dinosaur was. But that is no longer the case.
So Dapper, are you telling me the meme with like the dinosaur with hair, where it says we'll never know, that is a false meme? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that is in fact
Dang.
A false meme. I
Oh
know.
my gosh, Dapper. I don't even know what to believe now in this world. Like everything is just a lie.
Believe things that seem likely to be true.
Nothing is true. It's all relative. Postmodernism. It's over, Dapper. Go home.
Goodness. Okay. Wait, I already am home.
Oh, all right. Well, let me go somewhere else. Then I'll come back home.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we are coming up to the end. Thank you for your questions. Thank you very much for those of you who super chatted. It really does help out the channel. I want to give my guests here a chance to plug their own stuff. Unfortunately, I don't currently have links. I might try to get links up tomorrow. But David, what do you got going on your channel coming up here?
Oh, I am still working on a couple of things. I am working on a series on accelerated Christian education and the downright lies and falsehoods that this horrible curriculum teaches. I know when I was on the Leading Young Earth Creationist series, I spoke a little bit about that. And I am interested in doing a whole video or even a live stream about it. And it's definitely going to be a multi-part series. If you want to help, maybe we could do a couple streams together on your channel, since you have a larger subscriber count than I do.
Yes.
I think it is very important, at least for me, to be able to get this stuff out there, just so people can see how bad this really is.
Yeah.
So perhaps we can set up a date and time or whatever, and I can do a whole introduction about it and try and scan it in a couple pages and go from there.
Okay. Well, keep in touch. The next, I'm gonna be a bit busy for the next week or two, so I don't know exactly when we'll get that done. But I am also interested in doing that. So yeah, keep in touch and let me know when you have things set up, and then we can try to figure out a good day. Oh, also, Benthoven No Relation says, Dapper is one of the more honest dinosaurs I've ever known. I do wonder how dishonest the other dinosaurs have been. But Jackson, what do you got going on?
On my channel.
The most active channel on YouTube.
Is that a dig or not? I mean, like, I feel like I'm regularly active, but I'm not like the most active person. I can't really tell, Dapper. It could go either way, I guess.
It could.
I guess that's kind of the best, like, insult / compliment, I guess.
It's backhanded, but it's still a compliment.
There you go. Well, I'm doing a series right now on each of the tales in the Ancestor's Tale, in which we discuss them, and we talk about some cool stuff, some more recent data that's come out on some of them. Like, for instance, the last one was the Cro-Magnon's tale. We talked about the origin of behavioral modernity, so that was fun.
Nice.
Some cool stuff. Had a chat the other day with amateur exegete over Darwin's Doubt because he read that recently.
Mhm.
The next tale will be coming out relatively in the future and
Awesome.
not in the past. So there you
Well,
go.
that I am interested to know that you have yet to invent time travel, despite all the ample opportunities you've had and the access to 1980s gaming consoles that you've had. So, I'm a little disappointed, but not that much. Here's the thing, guys. I normally give you what's coming up on my channel, but look, you are either subscribed to my channel and you probably know, or you're not, and go subscribe and then you'll find out. And I've already given like 3 different times today what's coming out on my channel. I'm not going to do it again. Stick around and find out. It's going to be cool. So with that, I am going to hit the end credits, and I will hopefully see all of you wonderful people on Tuesday for a thing that you're just going to have to find out about on Tuesday.
Whoa.
Yeah. All right. I just want to take a moment to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Bob Knob, Bent Hovind, Ian Chen, Chris Love, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bede, and Patrick Dennis. My patrons and channel members really help make this channel possible, and without them, this channel wouldn't exist. If you would like to support me, you can click the join link on this channel below this video, or you can click on my Patreon, link in the description, and pledge. On Patreon, there is an option for an annual subscription, which comes with a 10% discount. And joining the channel will give you access to my custom emojis. However, if a regular pledge isn't for you, I do have a merch store, and if monetarily helping out the channel isn't a thing you can do,